Hello and welcome to the 35th and final full-length scouting report for the 2020 NHL Draft. Today we're going to be looking at the 9th ranked North American skater according to NHL Central Scouting, Braden Schneider of the Brandon Wheat Kings. Schneider is a player who is just barely not eligible for the 2019 NHL Draft, and another one of these players who I went into my tracking experience expecting to find reasons not to like the player. I came away from my tracking experience thinking that Braden Schneider might still be a little bit overrated in a year where it's a little bit of a weak defense crop, but not everything I found was as bad as I thought it was going in, so let's see what I found out. So if you've never seen a scouting report before, the way that we break down a prospect is we look at 5 separate categories: think, move, get, pass, and shoot. Within each one of these categories, we give them a number and a letter grade, where the number indicates the overall tier of talent that I saw across the 7 games I tracked, and the letter indicates the overall consistency within that tier that I saw. So first in the think category, it is very clear to me that Braden Schneider is a calm and careful pace-controlling defenseman that plays a solid defense-first game with a little bit of underrated offensive transition ability to him. At both ends of the ice, I felt that he made quick and sound defensive reads, able to pinch up against the boards in the defensive end in the neutral zone, and also showing a tendency to jump into the offensive zone to shut down breakouts right when they start. There's a real patience and efficiency with Schneider when he's especially faced in odd man rush situations. He doesn't commit to a decision too quickly or too late. He usually knows how to position himself to at least cover passing options and allow the goaltender to still have a clear view of shooting options. And his gap control and stick placement really felt better than what I was expecting, and I think his natural tendencies will make him a solid defensive player moving forward. He shows a nice ability to read opposing forecheckers with the puck on his own stick, evade that quick little pressure to make a quick read on a breakout and make connections on passes in the neutral zone. But Schneider is still a player who is very highly touted for a number of reasons that frankly I struggle to understand. While he was a capable defensive player, I felt there was a little bit of inconsistency when it comes to how he handled defensive rushes. There were also a few instances where I felt Schneider abandoned the defensive zone a little bit, pinching too high in the defensive zone before breakouts were even starting, and that's something that for a defenseman can really leave your team high and dry. And with the puck on his own stick in the defensive zone, if pressure was applied to him very aggressively, I felt that he didn't quite have enough skill to adapt to that pressure and manage other breakout options that weren't immediately apparent. And I still see this trend with Canadian defensemen especially that frankly I think needs to be left a decade ago in the sport of hockey. I don't know what it is, but a number of Canadian defensemen that I have seen this year still believe that part of hockey is also freestyle swimming races. And as we'll see is a bit of an issue, under pressure there were turnovers that really led to some dangerous chances and goals against in his own end. And I am not sure how you can really explain situations like this, but Schneider just seems to fall asleep at the wheel far too often, anticipating opponent positioning while they're cycling pucks along the boards. He just felt like a player whose game was best suited to shutting down rushes defensively, but if teams got through that and he was relying on positioning in the defensive zone on a consistent basis and adapting to pressure if he does fetch those pucks in high pressure situations, were areas where Schneider's game really took a turn for the worse. So in the think category, I'm giving Schneider a 2D. On defensive rushes, Schneider is capable enough of tracking forecheckers, using his body and his hands and his stick in an efficient way to at least clog up shooting and passing lanes and close off those breakouts. But many times I found there were really head-scratching lacks of awareness, sloppy puck play a little bit too often, and making reads both with and without the puck that just didn't really help his team out a whole lot. And the other thing that constantly keeps pushing Braden Schneider down my draft board a little bit is that he is one of the oldest first-time draft eligibles in this year's draft. And if he only has one more non-overage season in the WHL to refine his awareness, puck play, puck decision-making time, and refinements in the defensive end, I really question just how much of this game can project to the next level for Schneider. Next we go to the move category, and I wouldn't say that Braden Schneider's overall mobility is quite at the same level as Caden Gooley, but it certainly is not too far behind. He's a solidly built, lanky defender who can navigate around the ice really effectively, both forwards and backwards and to the left and to the right. He changes direction effectively with smooth pivots and crafty edge work. And there were times where he showed good flashes of skill, able to navigate around forechecking defenders one at a time and just find open ice and move pucks into that open ice. But I do question just how much of his rushing ability with the puck on his own stick is going to translate to the NHL. I think this is a player who's going to need to keep his game relatively simple, quiet, and effective in order to find success in the National Hockey League. He doesn't quite have enough skill or quite enough of that separation gear to be an effective puck rusher, and he does have issues playing under pressure, so adapting to that pressure quickly by making quick passes and quick little moves around the ice in a relatively limited capacity might be a focus for Schneider moving forward, but he could still be effective. With some solid mobility overall, I still found that Schneider had some trouble tracking fast and aggressive wingers laterally. So using his feet to manage those gaps laterally a little bit better and close off those players along the boards, which is something that I saw Caden Gooley do very effectively, might be a development that you want to see out of Schneider in the coming years. So in the move category, I'm giving Schneider a 2B. There's nothing extremely high level here, but it is better than what I expected. There's solid mobility in a front and back direction, able to change directions effectively. His lateral movement is good, but I would not say good enough to be a premier shutdown defenseman. And there is interesting skill for him to navigate around the ice effectively and move pucks at least at an efficient level. There's nothing in Schneider's skating ability that really leads me to believe that it'll hold him back from an NHL job. I just wonder how much the pace of play increases will really force Schneider to focus on defense first rather than pushing offensively with the puck on his own stick, especially with how he plays under a lot of forechecking pressure. Next we go to the get category, and Schneider is right up there with Caden Gooley as one of the best physical and stick-based separators of the puck from opponents. There are multiple tools and layers that Schneider can rely on to separate pucks from players. He's not all about the physical play, but he's also not all about trying to break up play with his stick. It's a very dynamic skill set, and he knows when to pull out the tools that he needs. He can clear rushing lanes with a strong upper body while still driving to apply pressure with his lower body, and he has a very long reach, and he can use all of these traits together to steer opponents into areas where he wants them to go. He's got a solid motor when it comes to applying pressure away from the puck, especially on defensive rushes, and he rarely abandons play unless he can get that possession back. And in the neutral zone, I found he anticipated play and dumped pucks very well, so he can glove those pucks down, evade initial pressure with that skill that he has, but I'm not sure how much this will project to the NHL, considering that his skill was good but not particularly great, and he is one of the older draft eligibles in this year's class. He's got smooth coverage of ice on his feet, which allows him to pinch higher in the neutral zone to use his stick to try to break up breakouts, and if that doesn't work for him, he can rely on his pivoting and switch over to backward skating to cover a defensive rush effectively. But I've questioned this a couple of times in the video already. It got to the point where driving wide on Braden Schneider as an offensive player trying to counter him was a tactical decision that other teams were making to try to get around him. The last game that I tracked was against Dylan Cousins and the Lethbridge Hurricanes, and the quality of player that Dylan Cousins is likely to be the norm rather than the exception once he hits the NHL. And in that game, Dylan Cousins found a multitude of ways in a multitude of situations to get around Braden Schneider's defensive coverage. And the biggest question with Braden Schneider to me is, how does a profile like him right now project to the National Hockey League? The NHL is faster, more aggressive, and more agile, and a number of players are at Dylan Cousins' level or even higher, and Braden Schneider, if he's going to be a top pick in this year's draft, is ideally going to develop into a player that can reliably counter some of the best players in the world, and frankly, I'm not sure he's quite there. His ability to generate speed quickly seemed to be a bit lacking, and that on a number of defensive entries left him a step behind or more. But if he did get left behind or get beat on a physical play, he certainly didn't give up. This is a guy who I think is going to work hard and earn his minutes in the National Hockey League one way or the other. It is an admirable trait that he has, and he is a good defensive player. Again, this all just goes back to how his game is going to project rather than how he is right now. So in the get category, I'm giving Schneider a 1D. Overall, I am a little bit optimistic that he could become a good shutdown defenseman in the National Hockey League, especially on defensive rushes in relatively straightforward scenarios. But against faster opponents and more agile players, that's when things kind of fell apart. So if he can work on building some of that quick, explosive first couple of steps in his skating to close down those lateral gaps more efficiently, get stronger on his feet to be able to pin players to the boards and win every physical battle he can, I think there's a lot of potential for Schneider as a defensive player here. Next we go to the pass category, and this is really just a big old Larry David situation. I found him to be a capable passer and a player that's not putting his team at a disadvantage too much. He can spot breakout options in the neutral zone and connect on hard, crisp passes very well most of the time. And he certainly is a better offensive transition player on paper than Caden Gooley was in my tracking work. There was a bit of inconsistency when it comes to getting full power behind his passes, so being able to transmit power through his stick more consistently will help him be a more reliable puck mover. Because I found that sometimes he was a bit careless with the power and direction that he was putting behind his passes, which resulted still in him being a sub 70% passing defenseman. And I've seen a number of defensemen this year who were at least above 70%, with some over 80%. And going back to the awareness issues that were in the think category, there were moments where I even saw Braden Schneider do multiple shoulder checks fetching a loose puck and still manage to pass the puck to nobody in particular. So if his spatial awareness and decision making can get a little bit more responsible and consistent, and that upper body strength to transmit weight into more of his passes can come a little bit of a ways in the next couple of years, I certainly think he shouldn't be a liability with his passing. But right now, like I said, it's a real mixed bag. So in the pass category, I'm giving Schneider a 2C. I think that this category is only going to become as good as his brain wants it to. I don't really see a reason why he can't be at least a capable player that you don't need to worry about on defense in the National Hockey League, but there are still developments and awareness issues that need to be ironed out. Making quicker reads and actually executing those reads effectively was a bit of a hit or miss issue for him, and if he doesn't really figure out a way to become a more reliable passer and connecting on more of his passes over the next couple of seasons, it could really hamper his potential development, especially if you see him as a bit more of an offensive defenseman than I do. Finally, we look at the shoot category, and similar to the pass category with him, it's just more of a Of the 27 defensemen I have a decent sample of, he sits 18th in individual low-danger shot attempts per 60 minutes, and he had one high-danger shot attempt and no medium-danger shot attempts, so I didn't really see him jumping into the offensive zone with the puck on his own stick at all. But the one time he did have a high-danger shot attempt, it was kind of fun to see him standing in front of the net, glove down that puck and shoot it from right in front of the net. It only happened once though, so this is a player that usually will just be shooting pucks from the point. It doesn't happen super often. I never found that his shot was particularly dangerous, at least not at 5-on-5, and I don't really see a potential goal-scoring defenseman in Schneider. I think passing is going to be a much more effective way for Schneider to generate offense. So in the shoot category, I'm giving Schneider a 3B. He didn't shoot it a ton, and I never felt that his shot was very dangerous at all, but this wasn't a player who was just lobbing pucks aimlessly on net constantly all of the time, and frankly, I don't really see an issue with Schneider having a bit of a lower score in this category. I think that his passing tendencies were a little bit more reliable, and using that skill, resiliency, and aggressiveness along the boards to push deeper into the offensive zone might be something I want to experiment more with him moving forward. So the way that we wrap up these reports is we look at the best part of a player's game, the good part of a player's game, and the not so good part of a player's game. With Schneider, the best part of his game is just a well-rounded package of defensive tools that he can pull out whenever he feels necessary. He's calm, usually he's intelligent with his defensive reads on rushes. He plays with his stick first and body second, and usually that's enough to separate the puck from the opponent. And when he turns play around offensively and he's making his decisions quickly, he has the potential to execute on those decisions quickly and effectively as well. The good part of Schneider's game is his skill with the puck on his own stick from time to time. He really is able to identify open ice, navigate the puck quickly into that open ice under pressure, find a passing target, and hit those targets in the neutral zone. It's certainly at a capable enough level that with any level of basic development, he should be a reliable passing defenseman in the National Hockey League. The not so good part with Schneider to me is just overall inconsistency. Some shifts and some games I thought that Schneider looked like one of the best defensemen available in this year's draft. But in other shifts and in other situations, and I found that as time went on there were more of those, I felt that there was a lot of work for Schneider to get to the point where he really could be a premier defenseman in the NHL. In 2 of the games I tracked, he was over 75% passing, which is something that you need to see out of primary defensemen on your team. And the last 2 games that I tracked, he was under a 25% offensive controlled zone transition percentage. If he had maintained that across 7 games, it would have been by far the best I've tracked. But while he's an effective defensive player, when he was faced against the best talent in the WHL, I found that his issues really got exposed. He's an effective puck mover when he has lots of time and minimal pressure to adapt to, but he could get tunnel vision from time to time and completely lose sight of teammates and just hand pucks over to the opponent. And yes, these are things that ideally can be learned over the next couple of years, and yes, his mobility is pretty good. This is something that lacks consistency for me a little bit too much for Schneider to become a premier draft pick in this draft. So overall, I'm giving Braden Schneider a 2C. One thing I have noticed tracking a number of European defensemen and North American defensemen is that North American defensemen show much more of a tendency to just be willing to put the puck off the glass and out of the defensive zone. Whereas in Europe, you see a lot more D-to-D passing, a lot more maintenance of possession, a lot more patience with the puck, skill with the puck, especially for defensemen, and constantly trying to open up defenses and open up rushing lanes and passing lanes up the neutral zone. Both Caden Gooley and Braden Schneider are unanimously seen as the best defensemen available in this year's draft from Canada that are not named Jamie Drysdale. And where Drysdale shows the capability of being an aggressive and intimidating neutral zone passer, Gooley and to a lesser extent Schneider have shown far less capability of doing so compared to Drysdale. So is Braden Schneider an NHL defenseman at some point? Sure, I can see a route where that's the case. I have him ranked in the early second round of my board because I frankly think that he can be a player that can just go out and eat minutes and be reliable defensively and be good enough with the puck to at least not cause a tremendous amount of turnovers if his development goes well. But is he or even Caden Gooley a top 20 talent in this year's draft? Frankly, I don't know how I can come to that conclusion reasonably. He is very nearly a 2019 eligible defenseman, and the player that really came to mind watching a lot of Braden Schneider compared to last season was Buffalo first round pick Ryan Johnson. But where Johnson had a bit more mobility and skill to his game and a little bit more flash with the puck on his stick, Schneider brings a calm and intelligent approach to the defensive game that still drove relatively similar results to what Johnson had. But Johnson was a late first round pick, and to me, Schneider might be a player that is worth picking in that range as well, but I wouldn't really consider Ryan Johnson a top 20 or top 15 talent in last year's draft. And as is similar to Caden Gooley, what is the overall impact that someone like Braden Schneider could have on the National Hockey League game, especially if he becomes a top pick? In a draft as full of offensive talent as this year's, what kind of offensive impact are you giving up to take a Braden Schneider in the top 15 or top 20? He's a solidly mobile and intelligent defender who can separate pucks well, but I have a lot of questions about how his play is going to translate when pace gets ramped up in the NHL. So if you're picking in the top 15 or top 20 and Braden Schneider is 100% your guy, you know what? Go nuts. I could see a capable shutdown player, potentially a top 4 talent, and any top 4 right-handed defenseman is worth quite a lot if they work out in the NHL. But in terms of a potential high-end impact at both ends of the ice and high-end offensive defenseman here, I frankly don't really see it. He's strong, but I found that he loses physical battles a little bit too often. He's smart away from the puck, but I found that he could really lose track of forecheckers and teammates a little bit too often as well. He's a decent passer, but I found he got tunnel vision far too often and just missed targets altogether, causing plenty of turnovers. On any successful NHL team, you probably need some players like Braden Schneider. And I think it'll all come down to where you're drafting him and what you expect out of him as an NHL defenseman. So that's all for this Scouching report. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked it, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really like it, you can subscribe on Patreon or here on YouTube by clicking join below. You'll get access to a Discord server, credits at the end of every video, data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted NHL prospects, as well as plenty of other goodies, or you could pick up some merchandise at the Scouchwear shop. All the links are in the description below, and 50% of all profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and thanks for watching.